Welcome to this second webinar in the Swedish Australian Chamber of Commerce webinar series on the COVID-19 pandemic's impact on business and trade. My name is Teresia Fors and I'm the Vice President of the Chamber, and I will be your moderator for today. SACC is an active and member-based chamber with over 100 years of operation, dedicated to creating a sustainable Swedish-Australian business network, and we have chapters in Sydney, Melbourne, Perth and Brisbane. Our members are both company members as well as individual members, and if you're not a member yet, I recommend that you visit our website and follow the links for registration. We offer individuals as well as companies a platform to network, a forum to share insights, as well as an opportunity to connect with business leaders and government representatives from both Sweden and Australia. We work closely with the Swedish Embassy and Business Sweden under the Clean Sweden initiative. We collaborate with the Nordic and International Chambers, the European Australian Business Council, the Swedish Chambers International, and Australian Business Council of Sweden. Also with us today, representing the Chamber, is Camilla Jennings, our Events and Administration Manager, and I will hand over to her to give us an overview on how today will run.
Hello and welcome everybody. So we have set up this webinar so all the questions and answers will be at the end of the session. And we prefer if we can use the chat for the questions and not using the Q&A option. Then we keep all the questions in one area. And if you want to ask a question live, that's fine. Just raise your hand and you can answer the question. So I will unmute you and then you get a live answer from the panelists. We are recording this webinar as well, so there will be a recorded version on our website post the webinar. And as soon as the webinar is finished, we also have a feedback survey, which would be great if you spend just a few minutes to fill out, and so we can get your feedback on how we can improve our webinars and topics in the future. I think that's all. Over to you, Teresia.
In today's webinar, we will look at business and what businesses can do to strategically plan forward through this crisis, and use this time to really review their current business model and maybe even pivot and rebuild the business into something new by asking questions like, how can we use this time creatively and spearhead innovation? And also asking yourself, will your business look the same past this crisis? During any crisis, it's easy to be caught in a state of panic and not be able to look beyond the here and now. We hope that this webinar will help you look at your business through a new lens and hopefully inspire you to utilize this time to build a maybe even more efficient and successful business model. Here with us today, as part of our panel of experts, we have invited Professor Glenn Wightwick, Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Innovation Entrepreneurship at the University of Technology, Sydney. We also have Jussi Ylinen, President for the Pacific region for the Anticimex Group and CEO Flick Anticimex. We also have Johan Nilsson, Business and Strategic Development at Constant Security Services. And to start off our conversation, I would like to invite Jussi Ylinen from Flick's Anticimex. Jussi, before we get into how you develop new products as a response to this crisis, tell me, how have you at Flick's Anticimex managed through these first stages of the crisis? What have been your key pillars?
I think the learning for us has been that first of all, you need to calm down and secure your own organization as a whole. We realized mid-March or early March that now something's going to happen, and we established a crisis management team. I would say early enough, now I can say. We were just unaware and didn't know what's going to happen, but we established a crisis management team to take care of the certain sub-areas like communication, first of all, personnel on HR or legal issues, then our service delivery issues, logistics and supply matters, finance, and sales and marketing. And for each and every group or segment, we assigned a responsible person. And we actually started to meet every morning, like a morning call at 7 o'clock, to make sure that all the areas that might come from the COVID-19 would be then tackled. And we realized that the communication within this team, we always agree that what should be now communicated to our employees and to our customers. And then the marketing and communication team also then helped us to define that communication method. And we actually could manage to calm down, first of all, the customers and also our own employees, then to start working I would say normally, but at least in a safe and a good environment.
Obviously, we are in a crisis that circles around hygiene and sanitation. One would expect that your business would be fairly well equipped with the product and service offering that you already have available. However, you still saw an opportunity to develop new products. What led you to diversify?
We're lucky to have a lot of colleagues around the globe and in Europe and Asia. And as this pandemic was spreading earlier over there, we realized that two things. First of all, we start to lose some of the business and we need to find a replacement. And we learned basically from Europe that this disinfection service is basically using a misting devices and methods that we use for pest control normally. We would actually use that for disinfecting premises. And we took that as a learning, and then we started to develop that service to further.
Right, and would you be able to share with all of us here, on an organizational level, how did you meet this change, or how did you make this new product possible?
Yeah, of course, a little bit the same way that we split the responsibility areas. So first of all, we need to understand the market. So we had sales and marketing understanding that what's the need for our customers. We also had to specify the service and define the scope and train our employees, a lot of training. We need some logistics help to get the chemicals. We're also fighting for the chemicals in the market, so we had to be fast and efficient. Also for the equipment, for the misting equipment, we had to ensure that we get those in time. And then we started to communicate, and we started to measure that all the sales teams, they have their tools how to sell the service, and then we started to measure how successful we are on a daily basis, and they started to monitor and then manage from there on.
Yeah, well, so also from what I understand, for your new product development, you're also bringing in a lot of technology as part of your product. Do you see technology playing a bigger and bigger part of your products and services in the future? And will this then also put a demand for different resources and capabilities within your organization?
Yeah, this is there's some good in this as well, because we have been launching and promoting a lot our digital pest control services, and that allows us to do the pest control monitoring remotely instead of traditional way of visiting the sites. We can do it 24/7 from our monitoring center, and this was actually fitting well to the needs of our customers who are maybe they were closing down their business. So we could support that even though the business is closed and your hotel is closed, but you still need someone to monitor and check that the pest control issues are under control. And then we had a solution and a good sales argumentation suddenly helping us in that and bringing that added value to our customers. And same with the rodents. Everybody has read from the media that the rats are taking over the cities. No people anymore, and they're going for looking for food. And this is actually happening. And we have been also successful with the with our customers to sell our digitalized rodent control services. Basically, we don't need to go there and visit the site, so there's no contact in our service, and also the social distance is always taken care of. We only go there when we are needed, and basically fitting perfectly to our sales plan. So we are a bit lucky in that sense that the solutions we happen to have is actually fit into the new market well.
Wow, fascinating. With technology as a segue, I would like to bring into the conversation someone who has closely followed digitalization of business and the society at large, and with a distinguished career in both digital innovation and development, Professor Glenn Wightwick. Innovation is, of course, a very extremely broad term and probably a word that is included in every single company's annual report. However, it may be an organizational activity that sounds good on paper, but may not always be as prioritized during normal circumstances. But now, in the midst of a crisis, we're probably all more or less forced to look creatively on our business model and drive innovation. In your experience, Glenn, where is a good place to start when innovation is a necessity to survive, or when you are set to make innovation a part of your everyday business model? Any advice for organizations who want to embrace innovation?
So, Teresia, I think you're absolutely correct. We're forced, literally at the moment, many organizations, just because of circumstances, to be really doing things in new and quite remarkable ways. I'll just give an example just out of my own organization, whose business is in the education of students, we have at UTS 45,000 students, and the whole learning strategy was built around an on-campus experience. We want to have people come together to learn and so on. And of course, in the midst of a crisis where we aren't able to, allow people to come together again, within a week we had to literally turn the whole model of the university on its head and move from 45,000 students being educated in person to 45,000 students being educated online. Our CIO jokingly said, she's been trying for about 3 or 4 years to get a strong sort of digital, uplift across the university, and just because of this situation, we've effectively managed that in a week. So I think what we're seeing at the moment is businesses, in sort of two modes, and being driven there by obviously the circumstances that we're in. And they're either struggling to respond, and we've heard of the retailers, Woolworths and so on, who are having to do, just because of the sheer demand, having to do all sorts of creative things in terms of how they manage their supply chains and so on. And of course, there's also enormous pressure and challenges for businesses who literally are struggling to survive. I was having an interesting conversation this morning with the head of the Australian Fashion Council, one of the many industry sectors that is being, significantly impacted. And she said, interestingly, a lot of their members are now starting to realize that it's just at this point how little investment they'd made in digital capability in their organizations, the skills, and it's not just the technology that they need to deploy, it's the skills and the expertise that they need around them, and that needs to exist within the ecosystem in order to be able to innovate. So I think this is just a perfect opportunity for organizations that can see their way through this crisis to really start investing in skills, in exploring new business models, new technologies, and so on.
Do you see that this time that we're in, do you see it as an opportunity for most businesses to harness a digital business strategy, or is it even an option to consider digital transformation? I mean, the technology and digital solutions to improve our service, or at least make our operational and our endeavor to achieve some supply chain efficiencies. It seems like a necessity almost today.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that it's an absolute necessity, and it really is a wake-up call for those businesses and organizations who, for whatever reason, haven't embraced digital capability sufficiently. They're really finding themselves in some challenging situations. The other thing I think we're starting to notice with organizations that's allied with that sort of digital transformation is skills. Both at the small business and even some of the larger corporate partners that we have, I've actually been quite delighted to see the interest that large organisations, many organisations are having in recognising that this is a perfect opportunity while they've got employees working in a different environment, and sometimes those employees aren't as busy in frontline roles as they may have been, to actually use it as an opportunity to invest in skills development. So just as an example, we've had a project we've been working on with Telstra for a while, and we were looking to help them do some transformation for software engineers and network engineers, and help them transform into being more data analytics focused. As soon as we got into COVID-19, I was intrigued to see and delighted to see that the interest from Telstra was not only around that program, they wanted to expand its scope in terms of number of employees, and also expand the breadth in terms of the sort of skills they're looking at, AI, machine learning, and so on. So I think, there are organizations who see this particular point in time, they're going to be in business and they'll make their way through this, but they see this as a really important sort of 6 months to sort of lay the foundations for, digital skills and capabilities in their organization moving forward.
And at UTS and the Department of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, you don't only look at innovation through an academics lens, you're also working with innovation and industry engagement in a very creative and proactive way. And can you give us some examples of how organizations have found new and innovative and sustainable ways of working?
So yeah, you're right. We do have, of course, being a university, we have lots of wonderful academics who, look at innovation systems and do all of great academic research work. But we're a very pragmatic university, and we're very focused on, creating capabilities amongst our graduates to be, employable the day they walk out of the university. So for a lot of our work on innovation entrepreneurship is actually centered around our students. As I mentioned earlier, we have 45,000 students at UTS, and when we survey them, 40% of those students said, now this is pre-COVID, so it'll be interesting to sort of see how this pans out moving forward, but 40% of those students, 45,000 students, said that they wanted to, or saw themselves as either creating their own startup or working in a startup going forward. Now I hope that, as we emerge out of the economic crisis here, there'll still be a lot of appetite for people to be innovative and create new startups. But that's actually led us to focus all of our work around supporting those students. So in the last 18 months, we've now got about 400 student startups. And just to give you sort of a breadth example, again, I was mentioning fashion earlier today, and out of 400 of those startups, I think 56 of them were just in the fashion technology, not just doing design of new clothes, but using, things like applying mathematics to do better modeling of clothing, to make more efficient use of materials and things like that. So, this is very much for us a broad university-wide initiative. And we're also working closely with industry partners. We happen to be where we're physically located right in the middle of a great sort of technology and innovation sort of precinct. So, we want to make sure that we engage with industry. We've got lots of interesting technology which we, have as part of our sort of research and so on, and we can often make those sorts of resources available, collaborating with industry partners.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Now I would like to talk in regards to another business that quite literally from one day to the next, off the back of the self-isolation measures that were introduced, practically lost their entire business and had to reset their offer. Constant Security is one of the largest security companies in Australia, with customers like the Sydney Opera House, Myers, as well as large-scale events as Cities to Surf, Mardi Gras, and events at the Adelaide Showgrounds. Johan, your first approach to this crisis was to support your workforce and help them see through this time with some very creative problem solving. You reached out to your network, didn't you?
Yes, I did, and I guess the security industry is quite a reactive industry to start with. So it's not I guess the first time we have to react to a larger situation or a problematic situation. But this was obviously pre-JobKeeper, the JobKeeper offer that we now receive from the Australian government. So we did reach out to our network, assuming there was going to be, overnight developments as had happened to us when they shut down, large-scale events and obviously Maya closed down and so forth. So, and then watching the news from not just from Australia, from across the world, there was a big shift there. So, who would ever know that people would be fighting over toilet paper, for example. So obviously, with those occurrences came new requirements, and based on the fact that we had obviously a large number of staff now available, that we couldn't just redeploy without having the work there, we were then available to support a big part of our network. So we had to retrain and redeploy staff to new positions, I guess, with new clients. Applying technology to the process, we could do so without having face-to-face interactive training sessions. So that can also be done by mobile phones, emails, and our human resource platform that we use and have been implementing for a little while now. I guess we need to add to the fact that we commenced a new journey towards the end of last year. We were looking at our business model, where we were going to be in the next 1, 3, 5, 10 years and so forth, and what part technology would play in that. So we were a little bit ahead of ourselves, and we were probably ahead of the masses in the industry as well. So we could then apply what we already had looked at, obviously a lot quicker than we thought, to this process.
All right, and technology is already extensively used as part of your offering, but did you find a way to repurpose your existing technology and find new uses for it?
Yes, we did. So we looked at a number of different technologies, as part of the journey that we're in now, but also leading up to it last year, and had a pretty good understanding of what they could be applied to do. So, drone technology as an example, that was looked at initially to support and supplement our officers and our patrols and providing a secure and safe environment to our clients or the end users. Looking at the abilities of drones, so instead of one part we were looking at was drones using FLIR cameras and heat mapping, looking at large-scale events, for example, where you can zone in on individuals that are developing a warmer body temperature as a potential result of a drug overdose. That same technology could obviously be applied now to look at or zone in on bodies that are displaying a warmer temperature, but as a result of, for example, COVID-19 as opposed to drug overdose. So there's definitely those bits we just, I guess, looked outside the box. Other drone technology, like it's been developed in the farming industry for quite some time, which is spraying weeds and at large scale, a lot quicker than a tractor, a lot cheaper than a helicopter, can now be used to spray and to larger areas like car parks, shopping centres, and so forth. So all as part of fighting the virus.
So looking in the crystal ball, do you see your business developing into beyond security, so to speak, that you sort of broaden the term of security, or so that what you have done now is not only to rebuild and regain lost ground, but also pivot your business into something completely new? And would you say that this development would have happened if the crisis had not been?
I mean, the development was ongoing as it was in a different direction with most of the applications and most of the technology. So I guess what it's done for us is really just open up the opportunity, more opportunities for us, and apply that as well. So I think we'll continue doing what we're doing, taking into account what we are experiencing now, and adding that to our services. So it also obviously happened a lot quicker than I guess what had not been for COVID-19. I mean, one large, I guess, obstacle in any industry, I would assume, definitely in our industry, is that when you introduce new technology or new services, it does take some time to convince the clients or the end users of these new service and the new technology. So people are often quite apprehensive in embracing new technology, but I guess this time around we kind of were all forced to embrace it and make the most out of it at the end of the day.
Interesting. To finish up this part of the webinar today, I have a wrap-up question both to Jussi and Johan. And the question is really, with these new products and services that you're now offering, will they form a part of your offering beyond COVID-19? Do you see that you would go down a path where you possibly would relinquish old offerings? Jussi, would you like to start?
Yes, thanks. Definitely, the disinfection service is here to stay, especially now when the business is hopefully open again, and disinfection is meant to disinfect those premises that people that they are safe to work and visit. And we see that as a precaution, first of all, to offer this service is important. At the same way, we already have some examples that our customers want to have this as a regular service. Good examples like new homeowners when the builders are building a new homes, and before they hand them over, just give the comfort and security that everything, when the new homeowner comes to the new home, we will just disinfect those premises just to make sure that everything is clean and good for the new owners to move in. For sure, this is to stay. And at what comes to digital pest control services, it's already here, and we just got a nice boost from this occasion. And we call the smart solution as iPhone for pest control, because it's going to change everything. Like in security, it was just happening maybe some 20 years ago. We're just behind you. We just don't need to physically see and what's going to happen only a few times a day or a month. We can just do it 24/7. This is to stay for sure.
Interesting. Johan, what about in your business?
Yes, I think it's definitely going to be a new normal. I think on a global scale, we will definitely have to offer services that we provided previously or pre-COVID-19, but they will have to be tweaked to comply with a new normal and to be in line with that. I think what this COVID-19 and locally as well as on a global scale has really highlighted is that it is so important to, I guess, stay on top of technology and planning forward, in particular in a reactive industry like ours, that is often apprehensive to apply new technology. So that, I guess, the fact that we were on that journey already and we are at the forefront of that within the industry itself, I think has been really what saved us to the extent it did.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I think that this has been a very good warm-up for some more questions from the audience. So it would be lovely if we had some of our listeners wanting to tune in with a few questions. So you just add the question in the webinar chat and I'll read it out. But if you want to ask the question in person yourself, just raise your hand and we'll pick that up as well. While we're waiting for a question to pop up, I'll cotton on to something, Glenn, you were saying about the speed of change and how you at the university had to fast track digitalization of the most I think education has probably looked or been taught the same way for centuries. Not to be rude, but it probably has. But obviously, this crisis made innovation happen very, very quickly, and the online offering became norm almost overnight.
Yep.
What sort of pressures did that put on the organization, and are we sometimes maybe a little bit too afraid of change just because we think that we don't have the agility within?
Yeah, I mean, you're completely correct. The situation was that we were very focused on, and have been very focused on, delivering the vast majority of our education, in person. And we still think that's really, really important. What we had been exploring, and what we've obviously been able to massively accelerate, is much more of a hybrid model. Now, temporarily, we've had to shift completely, virtually completely online. But one of the things that we're now looking at and literally asking ourselves and starting to really focus on this is, what does this experience drive in terms of what people are going to want from education moving forward? You can imagine a situation in the very near future where, people will want to be able to participate in classes, some online, some in person, some through, content being recorded and so on. So there's a lot of questions that we're sort of looking at as we move forward. We also recognise that universities, as you said, the business model really hasn't changed for hundreds and hundreds of years. And again, I think that they'll be around in the kind of in their form for a long time in the future. But we've been able to do remarkable things with international students. 30% of those students weren't able to, most of them weren't able to make their way to Australia before the government stopped, international travel. So we've had to do an enormous amount of work behind the scenes to be able to support them, engaging internationally, and we're looking at what models that we might explore, going forward. So it's been a bit of a wake-up call. It's been very much an accelerated, effort on many people's part. And I guess, like most organisations, we've had people who have been a bit laggard in terms of wanting to embrace, the new concepts and the application of new technology. The feedback from the students has actually been remarkable. In fact, we're just discussing this the other day. Our student association is putting some words together to actually thank the university. You never get this from students. They always not always complain, but they're very capable of telling us when they think we're not doing things right. So for them to sort of turn around and effectively collectively say thanks for such a good effort, I think is, it's very heartening. And as I said, we're using this as a really great opportunity to leap forward and think about, how we want to teach and engage with students moving into the next part of the year and the years after that.
Good. Well, Jussi, you mentioned something around that you had to fight for supplies. That's certainly something that you hear in the public debate a little bit more now, probably than before, is around local manufacturing, etc. From your perspective, the vertical supply chain and how to integrate your supply chain to your business, is that something that you've been looking at to secure those critical supplies that you need to be able to perform your offer or your business?
Yeah, of course, we've been learning by doing now this time. I mean, what we had earlier in place, we had to replace with some interim solutions, purely for the reason that there was such a huge demand, and everybody was basically trying to secure their demand, and we had to find our ways to make us important in the eyes of the suppliers. We're also using our international network and supply network to help us. We have an enormous amount of colleagues around the world, they are also helping us to, once they have a good supplier, we can share those information. And actually, we have been helping with our Chinese supplier to help our colleagues in Europe, because the PPEs, for example, it's just a huge demand for those, and we happen to have a good supplier chain, and we just help those guys, and there will be a time when they will be helping us. Then, but to change the whole thing, I don't think we will change our normal way of doing. Once we have got now over this huge peak and demand, I think we are now stabilizing, and I think the learning is that you're more efficient when you have your known and well-proven procedures for the supply. These emergency actions we had in place took a lot of energy. We managed and we survived, but it's not the most efficient way of working, and some disappointments there will be on the way, and even some of our customers were disappointed when we were late, maybe 2 weeks, when the rest of the world was late 4 weeks. So it's still being late, and then there's always a need at our customer base to get what they have purchased for. So some challenging customer-specific management was needed, and we hope to get back to normal where the normal procedures are in place, much more efficient.
Johan, do you have any experiences from, or something that you would like to share, what you learned from this time in regards to the need of speed during a change process, or when you're meeting a crisis like this?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I guess we received a call at 7:30 on a Friday morning, asking for potentially hundreds of security officers to be deployed across the country to various supermarkets to do just that, protect toilet paper, or more to ensure that people weren't getting into fisticuffs about the toilet paper. So speed off the back of technology was obviously extremely important for us there, where we not just had to redeploy and retrain our own staff, but also source potential local contractors to support us in our quest to support our clients and how to get them on board. So, 3 days later, we had 100 plus locations across the country that required, 2 guards or 24/7 protection. And then you add to that where we provided staff with that conducted thermal screening at distribution centres, because obviously a big part of the supermarket chain's work is the logistics, and obviously if that stops, then there will be nothing in the supermarkets to purchase. So speed was very much of the essence there, and I think that's where certain of our competitors and us stood out compared to others, having technology on our side and the ability to use it to improve the speed of or to increase the speed of our reaction, I guess, to the continuously changing client requests. So, we went from one day you had officers in stores in areas or in townships that unless you lived locally, you might not even know they existed. And we had to get PPE out to them and obviously retrain them as far as and upskill them to look at crowd control when they might have just done loss prevention in the past. So speed was really the key to all of our reactions throughout this time.
Glenn, if I may, I can't see any questions just yet from the audience here, but one thing that I wanted to connect back to what you said before was regarding retail, and how retail, we've been talking for a long time that retail really has to reformulate its offering, that with online sales taking up a bigger and bigger chunk of our transactions as consumers, the foot traffic into a shop is no longer maybe enough to keep businesses going. And I read recently how Samsung, as an example, is really revamping the whole retail experience, going away from the actual focus on the transaction to more exactly that, an experience and entertainment, the two important E's. The university, you mentioned that you're working with fashion and retail. Are you a matchmaker in between the technology developers, or are you actually the technology developer in this case?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're trying to focus on, and part of my role in the university is to try and marshal all of our resources to help our community, and the partners and partnerships we have, emerge out of the crisis. So one of the things we've been considering is, how do we harness our sort of startup capability, and how do we harness some of our resources that we have to support small and medium businesses. So the conversation we're having with the fashion industry was just an example of one sector within the small business. We also have a big fashion school at UTS. So we have lots of students that come out of university and want to work in that industry. So some of the discussions we've been having have been just trying to gain some insight. In fact, the Fashion Council were telling us this morning just some of the scary statistics. 40% of the small fashion businesses are concerned that they won't be able to survive the crisis. 70% of them think they could, but some worried that they won't. So there's clearly a lot of concerns. So what we're talking to them about is, could we work with them, looking at what their current business models are, looking at how they're using digital technology, and over the next couple of months, while we're in the middle of that crisis, start helping them think about how they might develop new product lines or new business models around their businesses and move forward. And there seems to be some strong interest in that. So it kind of comes back to, when you're in the middle of a crisis, yes, you need to survive and you need to try and keep a business operating, but it clearly is an opportunity to then try and think longer term about what that future business might look like.
Yeah, I guess that's what they say, that don't waste the good crisis.
Don't waste the good crisis, exactly.
We have one question here from Eva Reinander. And the question is, have you, any of you had to lay off staff because of the COVID situation, or have you employed new staff to handle/manage the new opportunities you have presented to us?
Do you want me to start? So
yeah,
we're in a situation where we, at this point, haven't laid off people from the university. What we have done is realize that certain areas we've seen peak in demand, supporting the students, for example. In some cases we've had students in isolation, and we've wanted to, go out and provide food packages for them and things like that. We've seen other parts of the university where, there isn't as much demand for a particular area of the workforce. So we've been able to be flexible in asking people to, move from one area and deploy into another, and even set up some sort of databases so that we can do a bit of matching across that. That's worked very successfully. The biggest challenge that the university sector is going to face moving forward, really relates to international students, and you would have seen a lot of stuff in the press. The longer that the borders remain closed, the more challenging it will be, because our international students make up about 30% of our cohort, and obviously that has an economic impact. And I just saw today one of the regional universities has announced some layoffs, so there is a big concern across the sector of what the impact of that will be.
No, very true, and it also has such a massive impact on the Australian economy at large. So it is a critical thing to solve, indeed. Jussi, are you still with the same team, or have you had consequences?
Unfortunately, we have some layoffs. We have taken all the possible ways of aligning the cost structure, and that have included also some layoffs. Also, we're taking some of the people on leave. We're using also long service leaves. Some of them are voluntary, coming from full-time to part-time for the time being, and some pay cuts as well. And on the other hand, on the technician side, where our people are working in the field, some of those guys who used to do pest control, still last week, they do still pest control, but part of their job is also to work on the disinfection services, for example. It's a new skill they're trained, they have the equipment and everything, so it's a new job for them. But maybe when they signed for a pest control job, that they didn't know that, but everybody has taken that very positively, and then they are thinking that, okay, this is to survive and save the job for myself and for my colleague. So I think a joint effort.
Good to hear. Johan, when we spoke yesterday, you mentioned a few examples of people who have gone from being bodyguards to indeed protecting those toilet rolls that we've heard so much about. Hopefully that seems to be over the toilet roll crisis. But all in all, how's your workforce fared throughout this crisis?
Yeah, so initially, obviously, with the shutdowns of all the events and crowds and the likes of Myer and so forth, we were definitely facing that situation. As we were able to redeploy to new clients and new requirements, I think what we ended up doing is we've actually increased our workforce in the field, because that's obviously where the requirements have increased. We have unfortunately had to reduce a few of our office staff in relation to supporting or in relation to administration of existing clients that are no longer really having any requirements. So a small percentage of reduction in hours, but overall I think we've been very, very fortunate.
Good. Thank you so much. Maybe this is also a question to all three of you, but as a business owner, or if you're maybe of a larger company where you have fairly large budgets, there's always a balance of how much do we set aside to develop towards the future in terms of investment of new technology or new product lines, income streams, versus protecting the here and now. And in a crisis, that's probably heightened more than ever, that you do indeed need to protect the here and now and making sure that the business has a survival opportunity past the crisis. But at the same time, looking at the future is not, it's not cheap and it's not for free. Maybe Jussi, if you want to, do you have a model within Flick Anticimex towards new development versus maintaining?
Yeah, I think I want to answer for this from the whole Anticimex group perspective. While we are ensuring and struggling for the cash flow, I mean, many of our customers might face some serious cash flow issues, which will be maybe probably impacting us and ourselves. We have our innovation center and R&D separately from the business in a sense that they will continue. And I was just last week in contact with the head of our innovation center just to make sure that all the projects that we have there cooking and coming available later this year and next year for our customers, we're still working on those. So none of those have been cancelled or put in jeopardy because of the COVID-19. We still think that the future is there, and that's and we here in the countries and in the operational side, we just need to make sure that that we have a good customers still next week and next month and at the end of the year, and who are able to pay their bills and being serviced.
Thank you so much. Glenn, do you have a perspective on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So just very briefly, the sort of core income for the university comes from our teaching and learning, and that's either from domestic students and international students, and the other source of income for the university is from our research. Fortunately, the domestic student load has stayed fairly constant through this, and we often see in sort of downturns, education is something where people focus on. So we're reasonably confident that the domestic student market will stay robust for us. Obviously, as I mentioned, the international student income is impacted, and we're obviously wanting to see how that will play out over the long term. For quite a while, we've been looking at diversifying away because, you know, many of the universities have had large businesses associated with China, and we've all sort of realised that that something could happen. I don't think any of us predicted a pandemic. We were all thinking of more political things that might have gone on, but you know, the impact is still similar. One of the areas that we are investing in is in what we're calling enterprise learning. And it comes back before to that discussion around businesses wanting to reskill. And when I sort of did a business plan around this last year, I talked about, you know, 12.4 million Australians in employment, and you know, the need to transform digitally and so on. Little did I realise at the time that there'd be 10% unemployment, and the reasons for transforming digitally would be driven by a completely different outcome. But there's still strong, I think that's an area where we're going to focus on, and it really reflects, and we've got this kind of in our 10-year strategy in the university, that learning isn't just about coming to university and doing a 3 or 4 year degree and maybe coming back later in your career and doing a master's. You know, clearly learning is a much more continuous, lifelong activity. And whereas in the past we would do learning in kind of large chunks, you know, a big degree and so on, I think people are now wanting to learn in much more discrete elements and still have those, you know, robust and academically rigorous, but be able to put together those elements into, you know, some sort of structure over time. So we've been doing a lot of work in that space, and in fact, this particular crisis is just yet another another vehicle for sort of accelerating our thinking in that space.
That's interesting. Thank you, Johan. In your situation, has this crisis increased your appetite for innovation regarding security? I mean, you've already proven to the heads of business that new things can work. Do you think you will, when we're back in a more stable business scenario, do you think that you will continue to have a much stronger focus on innovation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really has just whet our appetites, I guess, as far as the R&D goes for the security industry. And really highlighted that if you are spending considerably time and effort into your R&D department, you can, you know, roll with the punches, so to speak, throughout a crisis. So absolutely, there's no doubt that we'll continue our quest as far as developing technology for the security industry.
Thank you so much. We don't have any more questions in the feed, but we have here's one that popped in. Thank you so much. So it's from Marie McIntyre, and the question is, do you think that there will be a big shift from global sourcing to regional domestic sourcing when it comes to managed supply chain? And if so, will that affect your industry? Who wants to start? Jussi,
yeah, I can. Well, the actual material supply for us is still in a lower level of all our services, and when it comes to our digital rodent control devices, we have a global supply chain for that, and those will rely on, actually a lot of those components are coming from Asia. And part of the implementation and manufacturing is taking place in Europe then. So I don't see that will change now. And for us, we're getting some hygiene products and consumables locally and also from globally. So to my knowledge, where we are today and to our business, I don't think it will change too much, at least to the knowledge I have today.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people are going to be looking at, and I agree with Jussi that when you look at the supply chains, they've been set up over long periods of time. They've been very well tuned in terms of efficiency and cost and so on. I think people will start to look in more detail in the risk associated with the supply chain and some of the and perhaps look at having multiple suppliers to give a bit more resilience to them. Certainly there's some of the academic thinking has started to sort of emerge already in that sort of space. But as someone was, a discussion I was having with someone on this very topic the other day, they said, you know, if you think about wanting to source from different places and do things more, you know, manufacture more locally, there'll be a cost involved in that, and someone has to wear that cost, and ultimately that will translate through to, you know, the cost of the good or the cost of the service. So the supply chains have become incredibly efficient, you know, driven by cost. Yes, we've obviously seen some issues around resilience, and I think there'll be some more work done in that space, but there will be a balance that still will need to be achieved.
But certainly, I think what you've already also probably mentioned is how your online offering, then talking about students as source markets, your online offering may well increase the global footprint for UTS.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something that we had thought about, but we, you know, have been, you know, very motivated to sort of solve in a short period of time.
Johan, do you see, from your perspective, anything that could be developed locally that you at this present time would buy from somewhere else, or even maybe bring it in-house? We were talking yesterday how drones, the capabilities of the drones that you're needing in this very specific use, they're very expensive. They're high-tech stuff that, as far as I can confidently describe them. Would you see that would be something maybe that you would start developing yourself?
I guess that's a long-term question, I guess, to see where that would take us as an organisation, and you know, would our focus shift to the manufacturing side as opposed to the service delivery. But it is true, though, they are the high-end drones are very expensive, and they are currently not manufactured in Australia. Obviously, when there's a stop for imports, as has just happened, then if you've got your products on the way, they do sit on the dock somewhere, and you don't get much use out of them. So would it be financially feasible to currently manufacture those drones in Australia? That'd be very interesting to see if that was possible. Ideally, obviously, as we are an Australian company that source the majority of our products locally, that would be a fantastic offer to us.
And great IP opportunity.
Absolutely.
I think I'm going to wrap it up here. We're closing into 4 o'clock. Thank you, all three of you, for your insight and for sharing it so generously with us. We are truly very grateful at the Chamber for your support today. And before we finish off, I would like to welcome Camilla back to talk a little bit about our next webinars and the events coming up.
Thank you, Teresia, and thank you so much to all the panelists as well. It's been fantastic to have you on board for this webinar. We have some exciting online events coming up, and I will just share my screen here so you can see what's up and coming. There. There we go. Can you see it now? So we have a cooperation with the Australian Business Council of Sweden, which is the equivalent to the chamber here, but based in Stockholm, Sweden. And they are so we share our webinars with them as well. And they have an event on tomorrow night. So it's a little bit later for us at 9 p.m. And that's also about the COVID impact on business and trade. And it's organized together with the Australian ambassador to Sweden as well. And they have a very interesting panel on that webinar. If you're interested, just let me know, and then I will send you the link to that. So you can just email on the SACC email. Then we have another one, which is more a social webinar coming up on Thursday, 5:30 p.m. And that is going to be a little bit more of a quiz. And depending on how many people we have signing up, we will make it into teams. And the webinar, this social event is hosted by our Perth chapter. with Fig and Johan, who you can see on the picture, hosting this session. Then next week, on the 14th of May, we are looking deeper into the fintech industry and focusing on why is Sweden leading in pay tech and why many companies have chosen the Australian market. And we also have on this webinar, we have, for example, Klarna on board, who recently launched here in Australia in January. And our colleague on the SACC board, Camilla Bullock, she will be monitoring or moderating this webinar, and she works in that industry. On the 5th of June, we're doing a more social event again with a theme around the Swedish National Day, which is on the 6th of June. And on the 11th of June, we're having the third webinar within this series about the impact on business and trade, where we will purely look at the future. And there is also a very interesting panel for that webinar. We are holding that a little bit later as we have a guest dialing in from Sweden for that one. But look at our website and follow us on all the social media links, which we're quite active on, and it's LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And on this website, you also find more information and all events, updates, and also the information about membership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Camilla. And again, thanks to everyone for participating today. And if you have, for the audience, if you have questions that you didn't get to ask, feel free to connect with us in the survey after this webinar that will be sent out to everyone, and we will make sure that your questions are answered. As Camilla mentioned before, this webinar is recorded and it will be online. So if you want to see it again, by all means, go and click on the link, and feel free to share our content to your networks as well. Thank you everyone so much, and I wish you a happy and safe rest of the day. Thank you.